You hit me up just randomly on Insta and you're like, yo, can I get some advice on mastering? And I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
And you're like, can I pay you? I'm like, nah.
It's a weird one, man. I never know really like how to go about, because some things, you know, like some people get a bit funny. It's like, no, you got to pay for my time. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. All right. You know, but you were cool about it.
So I'm here with Goddard, who I'm guessing you're like a quite fairly sort of new producer. I'm just checking out your Instagram. I mean, you've got quite a few followers, 14.9 thousand, nearly hitting the 15,000 mark. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself and what's going on.
So, like fairly like new to the scene, I suppose. My first single came out like right at the beginning of lockdown. It was in May last year.
Yeah.
And then we did an EP and then a couple singles after that. And Prosper and Nicotine did pretty well.
Yeah, wicked.
And it kind of led to, I went to New Zealand for like a tour, which was just like an incredible experience. It was also quite surreal as well, because like obviously over here we were in lockdown and then you go over there and, you know, everything's normal.
Yeah.
So it was a unique experience, to say the least, I suppose. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've been to New Zealand a few times. I love it there, man. It's definitely a place that I love to go to play. The crowds are awesome. And
the people are very chill.
Yeah, everyone's nice, man. It's a good vibe out there, for sure. Yeah. So, new on the production thing, you hit me up just randomly on Insta and you're like, yo, can I get some advice on mastering? And I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
And you're like, can I pay you? I'm like, nah.
It's a weird one, man. I never know really like how to go about, because some things, you know, like some people get a bit funny. It's like, no, you got to pay for my time. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. All right. You know, but you were cool about it. So it's, you know, I didn't know really how to go about it.
I'm all about value, bro. Helping you out is not going to be a bad thing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, like fire me some questions. I'm not sure if I'm really like the sort of like guru of mastering really that much. I mean, I know a few things, but not sure if I know that much about mastering, but I do master all my own stuff. So
well, there you go.
Yeah,
because I feel like with mastering, for me, it's kind of like it's a very much a dark horse, and like there's so much information out there, which obviously isn't a bad thing, but it can sometimes taint it a little bit, because then you're hearing one thing from this guy and then the complete opposite from this guy. You're like, well, I don't know who to believe.
Well, I would definitely believe the people who've got the biggest hits and are mastering their own material, I think. And quite a lot of people probably wouldn't share the information if they were sort of mastering their own material and getting good stuff. But, you know, I believe in like sharing information. I think really from a mastering standpoint, it's not something that you can sort of just jump into. You have to dedicate a bit of time. What I would suggest is, and this is what I do, is I load up sort of all my favorite tunes into a project, and then I'll get a spectrum analyzer and a level meter, and I'll sit there and just sort of analyze the tunes over the course of maybe a few hours, you know, stop, make some notes, and you'll start to see patterns immediately, sort of where the bass is hitting on the spectrum, like the sub bass, where the kick is hitting on the spectrum analyzer, where the mid-range should be. And on your favorite tunes, you'll see sort of like, oh, there's a little peak at like 4K on some people's stuff, and on other people's stuff there isn't. And like there's just loads of sort of, there is a bit of sort of dark arts, I guess. One thing that a lot of mastering engineers do for mastering to vinyl is they will cut out all of the stereo information from 300 hertz down. So they'll take the sides of the thing, like all the stereo information, and high pass it, because you can't cut bass to vinyl that's stereo. But nowadays, because it's digital, I'm not sure if that's necessarily done so much.
I've seen like on the Pro Q, you can actually like, you can choose the mono and then just cut out like anything sort of below 150, so that it's just all in mono.
Right, yeah.
I think it's kind of similar to what you were saying, but did you say you go to like 300 hertz?
Well, for vinyl, it is 300 hertz that is the sort of the limit for stereo information in that low end, apparently. I mean, that's what I've heard. I might be wrong, but I've always sort of, I don't do it on every tune. If I just sort of knocking out a bootleg, probably not likely to do it, but there's not going to be masses of stereo information in the low end anyway, because I'd be using like mono kick, mono sub. But I guess some of the basses might be wider. I'm all about maybe layering the sub in mono and then having the stereo part of the bass on a separate channel maybe, and then high pass that separately. I think a lot of times what people want to achieve in mastering is actually more important to achieve with the source material. So like really good quality samples, really good quality sort of like recording techniques usually will provide better results, and then you have to do a bit less in the mastering stage. I know that just using sort of high quality plugins, I really like the FabFilter EQ. I think it's really good, but I'm not sure if I would use that on my mastering chain, like on my final. I use a GML clone, which is Plugin Alliance. I can't remember what it's called. I think AMEC is what they call it.
Have you tried the passive EQ, the Native Instruments one?
Yeah, I actually used to use that quite a lot, and I really like that one. So a lot of times,
I like it for that sort of stuff, like with groups and so like with your drum groups and stuff like that, and on the masters as well, because it's quite sensitive, which I think with that kind of sort of work, it works quite well.
It's very transparent, that one, I feel. But I really like that. I do really like this. You've reminded me that I should probably dig that one out again and start using it. I think on snares,
I do that all the time.
Yeah, man.
Because I forget you have these plugins, and then you're like, oh, I forgot I bought this plugin. I did it yesterday. There was a shimmer plugin that because I bought the Valhalla shimmer and I've been using it loads since.
Yeah.
But there was another one that was, I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was great, like really good for creating sort of textural sounds and really good for like ambience and stuff like that.
I think an area to sort of like really concentrate on is the mid range within a tune. This is sort of more in like the mixdown kind of time, but also in mastering. A lot of mastering engineers that I've been to, they sort of add a little 2 dB at 600 hertz to really bring out that sort of the low mids. It's a full octave from 1K, which is obviously like the center of your hearing spectrum. And it gives it that sort of bass tone, but on a mobile phone kind of vibe. So it allows it to have more sort of translation to different speaker systems. And the other thing that I would say a lot of mastering engineers are going to be doing would be like a high pass, but at like 24 hertz. So like cutting off the really low rumble on everything in a tune. And that's another thing that really helps to allow to sort of translation between different systems. And I think the original role of mastering was to take things from 2-inch tape to vinyl, or to it's basically translating from one medium to another to sort of like maximize that medium's kind of spectrum. I think now we've got into a place where mastering is sort of like, we think it's this dark art, and a lot of people are really like limiting very heavily. I'm not sure, I think
it seems very much like that. Like people are just competing with the loudness thing, and I personally would like to keep the dynamics in it. You want it loud, of course you want it loud, but I want to crush it to the point that you're just going to lose the dynamics in the track.
So there's ways in the writing time to make things loud before you get to the mastering time. So like, I don't know, like clipping, saturation and clipping on certain channels can really help. And I mean, it sounds like you're on your way. Like getting things.
I think it's just like, because like I said, you get mastering engineers and they say, this is an art form in its own right, and you completely respect that. But then it's also like, but this guy over here has just mastered his own track and it sounds great in a club.
Yeah.
So, what does he know that I haven't quite figured out just yet?
I think it's a bit of shtick in a way, a little bit. Like the mastering engineer needs to get paid. So he needs to sort of be like, ooh, look at my fancy studio. It must be something
like, desk, look.
I've heard a few of TB's masters and they are fire. Like really, really good. Stuart at Metropolis is the guy that I used on all my previous material up until I felt like, I don't need to pay a man 250 quid a tune. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's just
that's a lot of money for
but I mean, then again, it's like this sort of finalization process. So I think if I was working on a tune with like a big superstar, then that would probably, it would just give you that sort of like, okay, we're sort of finalizing this tune for like the pop world, because because Stuart did like Amy Winehouse and like Adele and all of those people. So it's like, you know, it gives you that sort of like, okay, this is cool, it's done. But then for like bangers in the clubs, I just don't know if it's really necessary to spend out that cash on, you know, if you feel like you've got it sounding right, then I don't really feel like you need to kind of pay someone. You know, sometimes it's worth getting like fresh ears from people, but I mean,
think you're right. I think fresh ears is definitely a good idea because it's tricky. I mean, obviously, I haven't been able to just give it a quick test in the clubs and that because I have a habit of overthinking things anyway. So to me, I'm like, nah, it's not as good. But then you can play in a club like, actually, it sounds all right. It sounds, you know, it sounds decent. But,
I don't think a mastering engineer is going to say to you like, I don't like the kick, or like, I don't think the sub is sitting in the right place. That's
usually what they say, isn't it? It's like the kick and bass aren't sitting right.
They might tell you that, but they might try and fix it themselves without sending you back in to sort of like have another go at the mix. So, you know, I guess just having like a network of producer mates and just building people who are on the same sort of level as you in terms of production and just sort of firing tunes to each other. You know, I send off tunes to people all the time just to sort of get people to give me some sort of, I don't know, like feedback on stuff, you know? Yeah,
definitely, man. It's definitely a good way to go about it. I think as well, because your ears get fatigued quite easily as well. Like I heard you say, you know, that 3 days is a good time to spend on a track. And I think that's pretty healthy, to be honest, because the first day you can sort of get that core idea down. Second day, you can really start to get the mix so it's punching nicely, and then the third day just kind of polish it off.
Some days can just be an hour and a half and you've got a tune finished, though. I mean, it's just, you know, and that might just be the best one that you've done this month. So
that's the thing is, so sometimes like the Prosper took about 3 hours to make, but then Nicotine I spent about 2 weeks on it.
Yeah.
So it depends on the tune, I think. Nicotine, there's a lot more drums and percussion, so you kind of have to sort of be a bit more surgical with the EQ and stuff. But like you say, I mean, some days it just happens and it just flows and you're like, oh, it sounds good, doesn't need anything else doing to it.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess just to sort of go back to the mastering sort of side of things, it's really a balance between sort of top end, mid-range and bass, and like getting those EQ sort of changes. But I sort of write into my mastering chain as well, so I've usually got it on when I'm writing. Sort of I'll get the tune sort of rolling, and then there'll be a stage where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to sort of see what this sounds like with limiting, or I don't really use limiting, I use like clipping. But so then I'll put the mastering chain on sort of, I don't know, once I got a sort of a vibe rolling, because it sort of helps me to feel what it's going to sound like towards it when it's finished. But yeah, it's just really, because then when you're mixing into your mastering chain as well, you can sort of do sneaky kind of tricks for loudness. So if you're using a lot of clipping, you can make your drum sounds almost so punchy that they would sound ridiculous without the limiting on the master chain. Do you know what I mean? Right. So then when it's all being squashed down, you almost get false dynamics because it's like clipping much harder at the very beginnings of the sounds. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, okay.
So like say with like a snare or a kick, if you wanted to get really, really punchy, using the ADSR, the envelope on the sampler, and just sort of bring down the sustain a lot and then have a really sort of like sharp sort of transient at the front. And then when you clip that off, you get a really, really punchy sort of sound, but without having, like, it sounds like it's got dynamics even though it's squashed to hell. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a cool little trick, actually.
Yeah, man.
You just find, like, over sort of, you know, as you get more experience, that it just comes more natural, and then you just know.
I don't really think...
Or do you find, like, it's a little bit different every track?
I find that I don't think when I'm writing. I think that's the best sort of state is like a flow state where you're like, oh yeah, I need to get that, do it. Oh, I need to do this, and then you do that. You know what I'm saying? So like, just flowing through it and not sitting there. What a lot of my downtime is spent creating sounds or things that I can just drop into tunes really quickly. So like hats and shakers and like all that kind of stuff is almost like pre-made. So, and like just making sure that my sound library is super sort of extensive but also searchable, and like I know where I can go to find any sound if I'm like, oh, I need a shaker, so I just sort of type in shaker, or I've got a plugin that I've made or whatever. So yeah, just
your sound library is like huge, man.
I've been collecting sounds since like 2006, so
yeah,
like
I took your advice because I was watching one of your episodes. I can't remember which one it was, and you were talking about sort of when you have a bit of and just making tunes as a whole just isn't really happening. And I had that quite bad when I came back from NZ. I was getting every tune, I was just halfway and I just wasn't feeling it. And then I just took your advice, like just dive into sound design. It does help. I
never use those words. I think you should just take those words out of your vocabulary, the ones that begin with W and B.
W and B?
Yeah, you said no, don't say it again, fuck's sake. That's 2 times now. Anyway, I never say those words.
What would you call it then?
I don't have it. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist?
I don't think it does exist because you can always do something. And the more people say it, the more you just get this weird thing in your head like, oh, this is what's going on. It's not what's going on.
Like negative energy.
Yeah, you're just tired or whatever. You just need to sleep or you just need to go out for a walk. It's not like, it's not a thing. Because the next day you'll always have something going on. Like there's always something you can do creative where like...
I think you're right. I'm not drinking at the minute because I find that it does help. Your head's clearer.
100%.
Ideas flow a lot better when I'm not drinking.
Yeah, man. I mean, I never used to be sort of this sort of kind of clean living, but like I think it's so important to like get a good night's sleep and get exercise and
definitely.
Be serious about working every single day on it.
Yeah, 100%. Like if I go into Ableton after doing exercise in the morning, the ideas are flowing a lot better. Whereas if I decide to have a lay-in and I'm not doing any exercise, I'm a little bit just like don't know, man. Just a bit more foggy.
I find Ableton has a certain sound to it as well that I'm not too into. I love the workflow on Ableton. I think it's sick. Like the quick ways that you could just get things going real fast. But I think Logic actually sounds a lot better than Ableton.
Yeah. You're not the first person to have said that, actually. I have heard people say that before about Ableton. But I don't think I'm experienced enough to give a fair judgment on that. I mean, I used to use Logic, but that was very much in the days of not finishing tracks and I think maybe Ableton will allow you to break those barriers. But what might be interesting from a mastering standpoint, considering this is kind of why you hit me, is to bounce out the stems, use the same mastering chain in Logic and try stemming it out, like bouncing your final from Logic with the same stems. And you'll find actually with Ableton, if you're using lots of plugins on the different channels, doesn't have plugin delay compensation on everything. So you'll end up going in and seeing, oh, that snare's like a tiny little bit off, and you'll like move it back into line, and you'll be like, those hats are sort of off the other way. So you bring those back into line, and then the whole thing's just like, ooh, that sounds much, much better. So like I've noticed you can do plugin delay compensation like manually in Ableton, but it's just not the same. I feel like Logic's so much tighter. So maybe that's a sort of little tip. It's kind of long, but then it's not too long. I mean, I used to do that with mix downs. I used to export it and do the mix down in Logic because I love the stock plugins in Logic. I think especially the compressors in there. I think it's nice to have a little selection. Whereas Ableton, you've just got the one. Yeah, and the two. You got the glue and the compressor. But Logic, you've got, is it like 5?
Yeah. Like in that one compressor. It is really cool. I'm a big fan of optical compression. I got an optical compressor in here, actually, like a hardware one somewhere. I don't know if I can show you. Down there in the rack. So sometimes it's like a green one. It's down the bottom. It's called a Joe Meek. The thing about the optical compressor is it takes a little bit of time before it starts kicking in, so you get much sharper transients, and I really like that. So I've always been a fan of the optical compression. Although I use on my mastering chain the GML clone from Plugin Alliance, which is called the AMEC EQ, and it just sounds amazing. And I usually just add like 29k on a shelf just to like bring up all the really, really high tops. Then I'll add it like 600 hertz, depending whether the tune needs it. And then I'll like tweak the bass with like a high pass and maybe a bit of boost. But, usually the balance will be right while I'm writing anyway, because I really know my headphones and I really know my speakers. So like as I'm writing, I just already kind of know how it should be sounding. Sure. And then I use just a really like a bus compressor, but just touching it like 1 dB of compression. So just like a real, not a lot, but something just to add a little bit of glue to the whole mix. And then I just clip it with K-Clip, the original K-Clip. And that's it. Like
so you don't find like with the 29K that it comes up to a bit harsh at all? Do you ever like use a de-esser?
I would stay away from DSs personally.
I think it's a dangerous game.
Yeah, I think less is so much more for me personally. Having, I've tried everything. I've tried like putting different things on every single channel to make the whole DAW sound like a desk. I've tried different kinds of saturation and finally settled on this sort of thing, which I'm really happy with, which is just those 3 plugins. And I guess it's about experimentation and finding out which ones work best for you and what your sound is going to be. But for me, it's really, my sound's very aggressive, very in your face, very sort of upfront, and I want to have that maximum impact when tunes drop. The other thing also is if I'm limiting or compressing, I will limit up to 0.6, not up to 0 or up to 0, like -1. I go like down to 0.6, so like almost like a half dB and 1.1.
Really?
Yeah, so like 0.6, because when you turn a WAV into an MP3, it goes through an algorithm to make those changes. And when you put something that's compressed through an EQ or something that's limited or distorted through an EQ, it comes up and clips again afterwards. So it's a similar thing with the MP3 algorithm. It has to make changes to the balance and re-encode the information within the sonic thing. So that takes a bit of headroom to do that. So usually if you have a bit of space, then you'll find your MP3s come out and they're just like, they're not limited to 0, but there's still a bit of sort of play up there in like the very top bit, which gives you just those transients back for the MP3 version.
And do you find that gives a sort of smoother finish?
I feel like it gives the MP3 algorithm a bit of a chance to sort of do whatever it's got to do. And you're sending your master off. Like with mastering, the chain doesn't stop like from the WAV that you're bouncing from your DAW. Like this is a mastering chain. So if I'm plugging it in through a USB stick on my decks, and then it's coming through maybe an analog system into here, like being distorted again, then out into like a PA system. And then that PA is like, has like loads of limiting on it. And like, it's going through another desk and crossovers and amps and speakers. Like you've got to almost like consider that that's happening as well. And like for Spotify, you're going to send off a WAV and they're going to do the conversion within Spotify's kind of, I don't know, hive mind, brain, whatever it is. So like giving it a little bit of space at the top, I think sort of, I don't know, gives it a bit more of a chance to do whatever it's going to do. I read that
so Spotify essentially kind of, they like normalize, so I think everything's kind of capped, is it, at 14 LUFS? So that everything just is at the same sort of volume. Yeah,
I mean, I think you can turn that off as well in Spotify. Because I have mine so that it just comes out at 0 here. Because sometimes I record off Spotify to do bootlegs and stuff, so I want it to be full level.
You use that audio hijack, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
It's great that bit of kit. For bootlegs, it's great.
But I'm using audio hijack now to like route the audio from Zoom into OBS and then out and around and stuff, and my mic goes through like plugins as well, so like
nice.
I use it all the time. It's a great plugin. But yeah, from a mastering standpoint, I definitely think a little headroom is, but I'm talking about after limiting, I'm not saying that, I think it should come up to level. It should be as loud as it would be, I don't know about how much dynamics. I think it really depends on what kind of music you make. I didn't really check out any of your tunes.
I think it for sure. It did depend on the track itself, like what kind of vibe you're going for, really. I mean, if you want like a heavy hitter, you're looking to blow people's face off, then you probably want to have it quite loud. But if you've got something which is maybe got some remote strings or some keys or whatever, then you want to keep the dynamics in there. I
mean, you definitely have problems if you had keys or strings or instruments in there with limiting and bass, because you're going to get sort of distortion and sort of like the different parts are going to interact with each other in weird ways.
When you have like sort of instruments like that, I find the mix downs to be trickier, a lot trickier.
And a lot of times it's just less,
Yeah.
Or
and
separate,
I think that's
as you said,
like
you're using buses. You could have like the distorted-y bit on one bus and then the nice musical bit on another bus, and then sort of almost compress that one bus separately. But I don't really do any of that stuff.
I mean, I've never
way
thought
too
of that.
lazy.
I just could give it a go. But I feel like, again, because it could be like going down that rabbit hole with it. It's like, am I trying to do too much of it?
Yeah, I don't really use buses. I don't think I've used a bus for a long time. Like, I don't have a drum bus.
Yeah, I was using them, but I've kind of leaning away again because I'm finding that the mix downs just seem to be a bit better without using them.
Yeah, and I always think like in the long sort of macro view of making music, if you've got buses and they change the DAW on you and then you can't load the project up anymore, you won't be able to get that sound back. I always find like, or unless you bounce the buses, but then you can't split the parts to send them off for someone to do a remix. So I always feel like that sort of, just all the stems down to 1 and 2, from my point of view, works from a longevity point of view. I don't know how you sort of organize your way of working, but if you're only 2 years into it, I would suggest having like yearly folders with months in them, because I've got everything that I've ever written since like 2004. Do you know what I'm saying? All in folders. You got to be organized, man.
I'm very organized now, but it's because I learned the hard way. I was running everything. I took my laptop with me to NZ, and I had an SSD card which I'd installed Mac OS X on it.
Right.
And then, so essentially what that means is like, it's basically that little SSD card is your computer and it's running off that. And I took it to NZ and I knew that I had to, really look after it, because if it got damaged, I'd be screwed. And we were in the airport and we were pretty tired, and we looked at the board and it was like final call, and it was on the other end of the airport, so we started running. And I had my bag open on my backpack and it'd fallen out behind me, and Theo behind me was like, "Goddard, you've dropped your SSD," and I was like, "Oh no, I bet it's damaged." And it was damaged, and because it's like quite a specialist thing to get these things fixed, the bill was like just under £1,000. So
it's not going to work.
I'm never going to let it happen again. Put it that way.
I always make sure that I back up everything in duplicate, or at least like sometimes triplicate. So I've got 3 12 terabyte hard drives with like.
You've got 3.
Yeah, with like they're all mirrored, but I don't use RAID. I don't use any of that. I will sit there one day a month and I will copy that month's work 3 times onto the 3 drives. And they're mechanical drives. They're not like SSDs, so they're actually really easy to recover as well. I've lost too much stuff, man. Like
you've got. I've got the hard drives at the back, so it's like what you've got. There's back to back, and I think there's about 50 in there, 50 terabytes. So it lasts a long, long time. Then you've also got the cloud storage and Splice as well. Does a cloud backup as well.
Okay.
But even still, you have all these backups, and then you could open it up on a new computer, and it's like, oh, you're missing 49 files, and you're like, how does that even happen?
So I find that stemming out a tune. So like, if you have a sort of a ritual at the end of making a tune, you're like, okay. When I used to work in like recording studios and stuff, we had like a special pen that we would write on like the CDR or the DAT tape, and there'd be like a ritual we would use to kind of like finish a tune. I'm not talking like incense or dancing around the studio naked or anything, but just like, just kind of having things that you do every single time. And I think stemming out your tune is a really good idea. Just for like, if someone wants to do a remix and you've got those parts handy as well. And if you want to sort of like go to do live work, if you're going to do like a live set with a band, you've always got like the track that you can split up and then have like the drummer do the drums and take the drums off the original tune and just have some of the parts come in, or whatever you're going to do. But I think best practices is to definitely stem out the parts, an instrumental, because if you get a publishing deal, they're going to want to have the instrumentals, an a cappella, the track, whatever.
Definitely. I think like with MIDI now, I kind of try and be quite strict with myself, where it's like, yeah, that's good, that's done, freeze, flatten it, put it into audio. So then just if lo and behold something was to happen to the computer, and then your new setup or whatever, you don't have to worry about the VSTs and stuff like that. It's like audio's a little bit, I would say, easier to
much
recover
safer
in that sense. Yeah,
I would
safer,
say even if you've frozen and flattened it, though, I would still stem it out into another folder, stems, because you still would have to load up the project, because when it freezes and flattens, it doesn't always do it from bar one. And if you wanted to reconstruct that tune later on down the road and Ableton went out of business and you can't, I'm talking like 15 years time when you're doing your like Goddard compilation greatest hits or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? You got to think down the road. Like I always think, you got to make sure that you think like from a longevity standpoint, that's important to preserve your art, because you're not doing like ice sculpture. You're doing stuff that you want to sort of last. So
no, 100. I respect that, definitely. It's I think it's I don't know if you're the same, but I get to a point where like, the track's finished, but then the next day you kind of second guess yourself, like, is it finished? Could it be a bit better? And that's just the sort of ongoing internal battle that I have with myself all the time. It's like I always think maybe it could be a bit better, and 9 times out of 10 I'll end up ruining it. But what I do is I'll save a new version and be like V2, and just so I can go back. So if I do mess it up, it's okay,
Yeah. I find it's very rare nowadays that I would like ruin a tune, but I often think that I'd save multiple versions as I go. So like, but I never go back. I never go back to them. But it's just to make sure that if that version gets corrupted as well, you can always go back to a previous version and just make the changes that you made before. I know what you mean about when you want to like make something better. And often I think just leaving it for like 2 days and then coming back and listening to it after a couple of days, so it's not in your mind anymore, like any of it. And also like listening to it without looking at the screen. So like either switch the screen off or just turn the other direction or go for a drive or whatever it is, headphones and a walk, and just make notes as you go. And like,
I do that. I do that.
Man. You'll hear all the stuff.
It does help. It really does help, because you find if you're looking at the screen, you're actually using your eyes more than your ears.
And you'll get tempted to go down those rabbit holes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Before you've done all of the critique that you need to do, and then you'll be sick of it before you go and make the changes. So like if if it's like hats, it just needs like 2 extra hats. You'll be like, I'll just do it now. But then you've kind of like ruined that first listening experience, which is, that's the most important thing really from everyone's point of view, is that like the first time you hear it is the most important, right? Because not many people are gonna.
Yeah, I think it's like discipline in a way, because you have to just be a bit disciplined. And I'm a sucker for it. Like I let myself down all the time, where I'll be like, I'm going to listen to it and get halfway. I'm like, no, that needs changing. But you just really have to just stop yourself, just cross your arms and just listen. And like you say, to take notes, because it will help.
I was so terrible, like years and years and years of just listening to the same loops over and over and over and over. I just really didn't need to do that, But I think I just would get a bit too excited about the tunes.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other thing I've learned is, you're going to have plenty of time if it's a really big tune to like hear it again. Like obviously I have to hear deep sort of like how many times a year, because I got to play it in every set, or like, all the tunes that I've made. So like, you're going to have to play your material like a lot. So it's best not to listen to it too much.
You're just going to get sick of it.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know. You can always make a VIP, I suppose, so that you're not sick of it.
This is true.
But yeah, I hope that I've helped you today with some information. I think
mate. No, actually,
answered some
really
questions for you.
The 600 hertz thing is actually quite interesting, because around between 4 and 500, or 3 and 500, I usually tend to dip it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe boosting that 6 could actually help accentuate it even more.
I've heard a lot of people kind of cut out the 250 or the 2, and I'm like,
really?
Does that give space for like the bass note of the snare or something? But I'm not really of that kind of mindset. I'm not sure if I would go down that road. I don't think I would be taking away from anything on a mastering.
I don't think I'd do that on a master. I think in individual tracks, because there's a lot going on in that area, then
right.
But I feel like on a master it could be a bit risky.
I'm not the most technical sort of producer. I'm just
you seem pretty technical.
I don't know. It's all ear, really. I use the Spectrum, but I'm not really like surgically technical, like sort of neurofunk guys, you know, where they like go in.
No.
Like they're matching
those guys are
the
very
bass.
Technical.
Yeah, I've seen something with like, I think Memphis or someone like that, or Face, where he's like matching the kick kind of thing with a bass note and then sort of like seeing how the waveforms interact and then changing the phase and like getting them so that they're like, I don't know.
You've already lost me. Just literally.
I know that Nick, I remember talking to Nick from Noisier once, and he was saying how he would like distort a bass note and then he would like high pass it and then pitch it down to the original bass note. So the second harmonic became the first harmonic, and then like the fundamentals would be like really odd going up the scale. What? Yeah, I don't know.
So what sort of result would that get though? Like,
I don't know. I never actually tried it myself. But you hear these things. Sometimes I think, oh, they're having me on, you know, like when people like,
let's just wind him up a little bit.
It's a defensive sort of like information. It's just like a red herring or whatever. I'm trying to think. There are a few things that Nick told me about. The fab filter, natural mode on the fab filter is a thing. Do you know about that?
What would he? No, I don't know about that. What
there's like there's 3 modes, isn't there? There is sort of like normal mode, the one with the zero not latency. I'm gonna have to load it. 1 second.
One of the things I've been doing recently, I bought. I don't know if you've tried this plugin before. It's the Black Box Design Distortion plugin.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
It's really nice. You just crank everything up, and then it's got a parallel mix at the bottom, and it's also got a mono maker as well. So you can put everything sort of below 150 or wherever you want to do, put that in mono, and then just add like 5 to 10% of it, and it just adds drums. It's really good. It just adds a lot more sort of grit. It makes them really punch through.
I would be tempted to just slam my drums through like clipping or like an emulator of like a preamp or something like that. But yeah, that does sound like it's that. So with preamps, I've like analyzed my preamps, and when you put something through like a Neve pre, like a bass, it's like it's like distortion in parallel but low passed. So it's similar to what you're saying, where you've got distortion and you're turning it down so it's in parallel because you're doing the mix control, like 15%. But it's also like the side chain or the parallel chain of the distortion is also sort of low passed as well.
Right.
So like for bass, not like loads, but like from about 300. So you get sort of some of the overtones, but you don't get the like serious distortion all the way up to like the top end or mid range. But I'll check out the Black Box Design. That sounds interesting. I've got Fab Filter here. Yeah, I can do this. And it is
the magic button.
So there's zero latency, natural phase or linear phase, and apparently natural phase is a thing. So yeah, apparently that's a thing. Definitely worth trying on stuff.
Do you know what? I've only just recently bought the Pro Q. I've put it off so long because it's not cheap.
It's not cheap,
but it's. Do you know what? It's worth the money though. It is really, really good. Because I'm used to using the Ableton EQ, so then going from the Ableton one to that Pro Q, it feels very surgical. But yeah, it's good.
And like, are you using the Spectrum in there? Spectrum Analyzer? Do you use Spectrum Analyzers at all?
I use it sometimes with the kick and bass, like to see if there's, because you can see like if there's a bit of clashing going on with frequencies and stuff like that. I'll sometimes use that just to sort of double check it. But again, mate, I'm still kind of very much sort of getting to grips with it at the minute.
There's a Spectrum that I use a lot called IXL, but you have to use it with 32-bit livs because it's still a 32-bit plugin. And they don't make it anymore and you can't buy it anywhere. But this is it here. So yeah, it's amazing. It's like the best Spectrum Analyzer just because you've got like really clear lines and you can set it up exactly how you want it. I don't know what other Spectrums I use.
I use the Span I use.
Yeah, I've used Span. I don't love Span. Just because really
it's a bit laggy.
It's a bit laggy, and when you know there's a 200 hertz peak in a kick and you're not seeing it every single time, I'm just like, what else am I not seeing? Because I can hear that, and if I can't see it in a Spectrum, then I'm like, not sure about that. The best Spectrum I've ever used is this one here, but it kind of only comes with my sound card. It's the RME.
Yeah.
This one here. It's just amazing, man. I
think this is the one. I was watching Break do a tutorial on mastering, and he had the spectrum analyzer he was using was so responsive. I could just see it in the corner of the screen. You could see how responsive it was. I was like, what is that spectrum analyzer? But I think may have been that one, but it was definitely one that you had to have the audio interface with it.
Yeah, so it's RME sound cards come with the software, but it works with the hardware, and it's always running at like I don't know, 60 frames a second. And it's just, and because it's separate from sort of the door, anything that's being processed in the door isn't affecting the speed of the analyzer. So it's not very detailed. I mean, you can see it's only got like, you know, bars, like bar graphs, but each one of these sort of like, that's 5 dB in that space.
Yeah, it's precise, isn't it?
So you can see that if there's 40 hertz, you can tell if it's like 2 dB too loud or 2 dB too quiet, which on so many spectrum analyzers, you just can't get that kind of definition. So
have you ever bought like an outboard one?
Yeah, I bought a TC Electronic one that was like, you could load a plugin into the door and it would talk to this outboard Spectrum. I can't remember what it was called, but I sold it on eBay. I didn't like it.
Did you find, was there quite a bit of latency with it? Or
and it was really pretty. And I was like, yeah, that looks amazing. But actually, I didn't find myself using it at all. And the RME one was just so good that I was like, I just don't need it. So I don't really sell a lot of music gear, but I just slung that one on eBay. I was like, I don't need it. It didn't work for me. So it was really pretty. I kind of wish I'd kept it now, because like with my hardware setup, it would be quite cool to have a dedicated hardware Spectrum, like working with like a digital output on one of the samplers or something. I think that'd be sick. But, you know, just one of them ones, isn't it? But yeah, so I can not recommend highly enough getting a decent Spectrum analyzer and also just loading up all the tunes that you love and learning them from a spectral point of view and also a level point of view. So like there's two aspects to mastering. There's going to be the balance, which is a spectral sort of like component, and how clipped or the perceived volume with like an RMS scale or an LUFS scale. And you'll see that most tunes are quite similar. It'll be like 0.5 or 0.4, or really loud people will be like 0.0. You know, but just
zero. I mean,
just working out where you are. I've managed to clip RMS before on a tune, which I was really proud of that actually. I didn't think it was.
I'd love to have seen the waveform of that. It'd just be like one block.
I think it was just some mangled, bendy sort of, but it sounded right. It sounded good. So I was like, well, that's happening today. But yeah, so like I think like, you know, having sort of like a really comprehensive suite of plugins to do analysis, and then learning each sort of like plugin inside and out, and then you'll
definitely and the past year, because I've like Waves had a huge sale and I bought some plugins. I've always used Ableton stock plugins, and I got all of them, but I thought
this is where you might start getting the latency issues with the Waves plugins. Maybe when people just use stock plugins. In fact, actually, you know, the Ableton Spectrum isn't that bad on the EQ. It's really isn't that bad. I think maybe that could be a good option.
I haven't actually opened it in ages, because I just got the span and then I just started using it. But like I said, it's so much latency. I mean, it's good for like tuning drums, I suppose, but the latency thing is a bit of a problem.
There's one by Melda Audio. I think it's free. Melda plugins are amazing, but the whole package is quite expensive. But I think the analyzer is free if you just kind of sign up. So that's probably worth checking out. They've got this EQ, which is like it's like a backwards spectrum analyzer, but it will mirror what's happening on the spectrum, but in reverse, so that you can flatten out any sound. It's actually pretty mad. It's like spectral sort of compression in the sense.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
badass. Man. There's a lot, like for vocals and stuff. You you know, sometimes you need to have that sort of control over sort of, you know.
Vocals can be tricky. I feel like with vocals, it either happens straight away or you can be fiddling with them for quite a long time, and it can be a really bit of a nightmare. But
again, I think it's a recording thing more than it's like if you record them right in the right room, so like a really dead room with a really good mic going into a good pre and then into a good sound card, and also how you sort of, I don't know if you're recording people much, but making sure that the whole atmosphere is a really good experience for the vocalist from start to finish is really important.
I think as a producer, like making them feel at ease is quite an important role for you, like, because it's a very intimidating thing to get inside of a booth and start singing. So if you can make them feel at ease and just relax, then you're going to be well on the way, I would say. But
in my experience, most singers are a little bit nutty anyway. So like, usually nerves is not the issue. But
they just come like gallivanting in, like,
I'm here. But some people are, you know, more shy, but just like, hey, you're a dog person. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, I'm a dog person. Yeah, he's only 10 months. He's just still a pup.
I got a 9-year-old husky.
I see. Yeah. Is it a boy or girl?
He's a boy. Yeah. He's asleep at the moment because he's 9. He doesn't really do a lot. We just got back from a long walk as well. So, but yeah, man. So yeah, I don't know if you've got any questions to wrap up.
No, mate. Do you know, it's actually really insightful, and I think I'm going to spend today just doing some more of. I'm going to check out this Melda audio as well, actually.
Yeah, awesome. Melda, great plugins. They're a little bit sort of dated, but really good package. I don't really know what other sort of things there are that I use that much. I mean, you talk about vocals as like, you know, vocal chains. I really like building vocal chains. If you know.
I've never thought of doing it because I always find like the recording's different, and I like to just do it from scratch every time, which does take longer. But I don't know. I don't know. It's just every recording's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I always save it, so it'd be like this tune name and then vocal chain for this vocalist, and then I'll put it away. And then, you know, if they come back, then you get the same sound on their vocal for every tune. So I think
that's a good point. Yeah,
I must have like a few for Jake's and a few for different vocalists that I've worked with over the time, so that, you know, sometimes you can, and sometimes if you're on like a quick session, it's good to have those sort of like racks of kind of plugins ready to go.
Yeah, racks are good. I mean, it's for workflow. If you've got a bunch of racks, it makes the session 10 times quicker.
Yeah, for real.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet you,
mate,
and I appreciate your time today.
Man. I really appreciate you taking the time to give us a bit of insights on mastering.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, no,
I end up getting some really amazing content from it, so like that really helps me. And, you know, and anything I can do to help out anybody who's going to watch this on YouTube, you know, it really helps to sort of like just sort of build the community and help everyone get information. It's not really a DnB talk, but I would love to have you in for a proper DnB talk at some point. If you'd be up for joining me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, mate, that'd be wicked. Yeah, I'd love to.
And yeah, I mean, it's more of like a production focused thing, but this was, so that was awesome.
I'm sure people will take stuff away from it, because I feel like I get a lot of people messages about mastering, like, who does your mastering, who does your mastering, who does your mastering? But I think going back to what you said as well, I mean, I say this to people as well, like, it's more about concentrating the mix, because you can't polish a turd.
100%. And like the sounds, the original source sounds are just so important, man.
Yeah, it's like sample selection, like you say, like EQ, compression, like it's the fundamentals, really, like just. And like, again, what you said before, like less is more. I think I could definitely vouch for that, because when I've tried to make things overcomplicated and think, I'm going to use this plugin, that and that and that, you end up making it worse. Just keep it simple.
A lot of tunes of mine have got like 5 plugins on the whole tune.
Well, there you go. See?
You know, it's not. I don't think you have to go in that much. And some of my best tunes are like 5 to 10 tracks.
I saw like Turner once, and he had this he did his tour. He had so many layers. I was like, whoa! It's like something like 90 layers in there. I was like, bloody hell, that's a lot.
He's in
that
it.
Would make my head spin. That would.
I think after a while you get used to that kind of mental picture of being able to find stuff. But and you know, I'm pretty sort of organized at the end of, you know, talking about rituals again. I like color all the tracks, and I'll put
I do that as well, and group it. And I like it easy on the eyes.
Yeah, you know,
for sure.
Sometimes it makes it sort of better for you to be able to just make those quick changes quickly if it's a bit more organized. But sometimes, it just depends, but yeah. Wicked, man. Thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate your time.
Cheers, mate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, wicked. All right, bruv.
Cheers, bro.
Take it easy. In a bit.